In this week's parsha, after describing a number of different karbonos and sin offerings, the Torah describes a sin offering that's brought by a kohen gadol if he does an aveira unintentionally. The Torah describes a sin offering that comes by the whole community of the Yidden, the whole congregation, if the Sanhedrin had given an instruction to do something that the Yidden shouldn't have done. And then the pasuk says, Asher nosi yechto, if the one who sins is a nosi, is the leader. Rashi says that the word Asher over here is from the word Ashrei. Ashrei Adar, fortunate is the generation that its nosi, its leader, is paying attention and taking it to heart to bring a kapara for his unintentional sins, how much more so that it will regret his intentional sins. Now, seemingly what's bothering Rashi is the word Asher that this section starts off with. Why doesn't it start off similar to the previous sections, like if a Nasi will sin? What is this Asher? And that's why Rashi gives the explanation that Asher is from the word Ashrei. The problem, however, is there are other mefarshim that do have explanations for the word Asher that fit very well with Pshutei Shel Mikra. Why does Rashi need to come to this explanation of Ashrei? Some more things that Rebbe says we need to understand is, number one, why are we speaking about the generation? Ashrei Hadoir, the generation is fortunate. Why aren't we speaking about the Nasi himself? How great it is that he is regretting his Aveiros. Number two, says the Rebbe, what in fact is the fortune of the generation by the fact that their Nasi is regretting his Aveiros? And also, why would it be relevant in this section, in this parsha for the Torah, to notify us? When we're speaking about the Aveira and the carbon of a Nasi, why are we suddenly speaking about that fortunate is the generation? How is that relevant? Another thing the Rebbe says is that in the Midrashe Chazal that Rashi is based on, there's actually a conclusion that says that if the leader acts in this particular way, then surely all the regular people will learn from him and also do tshuva. But Rashi doesn't bring this at all, and the question is, why not? Now, there are mefarshim that explain that what Ashrei Ador, what the generation is fortunate is because we're speaking over here about the humility of this Nasi, that he is ready to go ahead and admit to those things that he did wrong, and therefore his melucha, his kingdom will endure, will last. But then again, the question is that it's not so much about the generation, it's more about how lucky this Nasi is going to be. The Rebbe now focuses on some differences between the way Rashi brings this saying and the way it's brought in the original sources. In the original sources, it says, Ashrei Adar, fortunate is the generation that the Nasi brings a carbon chatos for his shoygeg. Brings a chatos. Rashi adds the words noisein leiv, that he takes it to heart, and rather than bringing maybe chatos, Rashi says lahavi kapara, to bring a kapara for his unintentional act. And finally, says the Rebbe, why is Rashi quoting in his Dibra Maschel only the words Asher Nasi Yechto, which seemingly is only focusing on the sin, if the main thing why they're fortunate is because of the charota and carbon that he's going to bring? Why isn't Rashi somehow hinting to those psukim that are going to be speaking about the carbonos? To explain all of this, the Rebbe says, Rashi actually does not mean that when the Nasi brings a carbon for his shoygeg, that everyone's going to learn from him and act in a similar way. Because if that's what's going on, then seemingly we should have learned this lesson already from earlier on in the Torah, a few psukim back when it was speaking about the carbon that the Kohen Gadol brings for his shoygeg. One could say the same idea. If the Kohen Gadol that's so holy, always in the Beis HaMikdash and so on, and yet he is bringing a carbon for his shoygeg, he's not being embarrassed and bringing a carbon, how much more so all of us regular people should? Which tells us that it's not this kal v'chomer that we're learning from the Nasi, because that could have been learned by the Kohen Gadol. It must be something else that we're learning, and something that specifically applies by the Melech, by the Nasi, and not by the Kohen Gadol. In order to understand this, says the Rebbe, what was really bothering Rashi? The question over here is, the word Asher usually shows that it's a continuation to that which was happening before. Asher means that. We're in the middle of discussing something, and we say that, so it's somehow a continuation to the previous section. What is in fact the connection between the Kohen Gadol, the Melech, the Nasi, and the previous section, which was speaking about the community that did an Aveira based on the instruction of the Sanhedrin? Also, why in fact is the Torah hinting to this whole idea that Ashrei Hadoir, in the words that are connected to the sin, Asher Nasi Yechta, rather than somehow hinting into the pasuk that's going to be speaking about the karbonos and the kapara that the nasi is going to bring. And this is why Rashi is learning that the fortune of the generation is not because the practical carbon that the melech is bringing right now, that the nasi is bringing. It's something actually to do with his sin. To use Rashi's words, noisein leiv, the fact that he really takes his sin to heart, as we will soon discuss. In order to appreciate this, says the Rebbe, let's have a look what was happening in the previous section. When you had a whole community of Yidden that are doing an Aveira as a result of a psak din from the Sanhedrin who had made a mistake. The Torah refers to it as chatos hakol, as the sin offering of the whole congregation, of all of the Yidden, which emphasizes the idea that all of the Yidden together are feeling that this is their chatos, that they want a kapara, that they need a kapara, that they need something to be atoned for. And the question is why? Where are they getting this feeling from? They didn't do anything wrong. They did what Torah tells them to do. They followed the instructions of the Supreme Court, of the Sanhedrin. Where are they getting this feeling of regret, of tshuva? This is what Rashi says. That the next words in the Torah after Chatas HaKolu, when it says Asher Nasi Yechta, is telling us about Ashrei Hadoir, how fortunate this generation is. In other words, Rashi does obviously learn that the word Asher also means if the Nasi sins. He doesn't even have to say that. But it's mainly about his Chiddush, that is Ashrei Hadoir, meaning when you have a Nasi, when you have a leader, that it bothers him so much, not only that he brings the carbon, but he's bothered so much, noisein leiv. He cares so much to bring a kapara, not only a carbon. Kapara, he feels he needs atonement for his shoygeg. If you have such a nasi that's bothered so much by the thing that he may have done wrong by mistake, then Ashrei Ador, fortunate is the generation, meaning, because surely such a nasi is also going to ensure that his followers, that his people, that his nation is not going to come to any sin. Not all, certainly not Averis, but made intentionally, but not even b'shoygeg. So now we can understand the connection between these two sections in the Torah. That it's because they have such a nasi, Ashrei Adoir, that's why they have such a strong feeling that even if they ended up doing something wrong based on the instructions of Beis Din, they are going to want to do tshuva for it. This is because their nasi had taught them to act in this way, to be caring so much, even for something a shoygig, and that's why Ashrei Adoir. Says the Rebbe, this is also why this says it specifically by the Melech and not by the Kohen Gadol. The idea of the Kohen Gadol, he is the one that mainly brings karbonis for the Yidden, kapara for the Yidden. The most he would inspire the Yidden is that if they did an Aveira, go ahead, bring a carbon and do tshuva. As opposed to the Melech, his thing is to lead the people, to guide the people, to show the people. So when we see that he cares so much and it's bothered him so much, when there's even a situation of a shoygeg, clearly he's the kind of person that's also going to be ma'ored his people in that way, that they should be bothered by any sort of Aveira, even if it's a shoygeg, which means that he's going to make sure that they don't do Aveiras to start with. And that's why once again we say about them, wow, Ashrei Ador, what kind of great generation this is. The Rebbe turns now to Yeinish Torah, to the Chassidus in this Rashi. Chassidus explains that the Kohen Gadol brings down Avas Hashem to the Yidden. The Melech is the one that inspires the Yidden with Yiras Hashem. As a result of Avas Hashem, this usually brings one to do mitzvahs. Including also, if he ended up doing an Aveira, he'll bring a carbon for it. But it's not negating the whole concept of Aveiras to start with. So that's more the Kohen Gadol. On the other hand, the Melech that inspires the Yidden with Yiras Hashem, to feel the severity, the seriousness of an Aveira, he doesn't want to rebel against Hashem. That's going to cause that he doesn't want to sin at all. And that's the Melech. So Ashrei Adoir that has such a nasi. Says the Rebbe on a deeper level. The carbon chatas, as we know, comes for a shoygig. But even a shoygig we know is coming because the nefesh Bahamas is a bit strong, klipas noiga, and so on. And therefore, as a result of the avoid of the Kohen Gadol, Avas Hashem, when a person loves Hashem, there's still some room for his own mitzias, for his own feelings, for his own identity, and so on. And therefore, ultimately, after many, many levels, feeling of one's own mitzias could also lead that the person's nefesh Bahamas is a bit stronger, and it can lead him to do an Aveira, at least b'shoygeg. But as a result of Yiras Hashem, which is the idea of absolute bittul, not leaving any room for anything outside of Hashem, one doesn't even come to an Aveira b'shoygeg. And the Rebbe concludes with the Hairah about the Melech in our own personal Avodah. We know that the whole person is considered like a little world, a small world. The Melech inside of him is his head, is his brain. So Ashrei Ador, fortunate is the generation that it has a head, that the head is leading the body, and he really cares enough and is bothered enough. He's going to rule over the heart to make sure that the person doesn't want to do any Averis and doesn't do an Averis. As the Alter Rebbe says in Tanya, that every person has the ability within that willpower in his mind to rule over his heart. And then he'll be careful not to fall through in any Averis. And if he ends up doing something even b'shoigig, not only does he do tshuva practically, but he thinks about it. Where's this coming from? Must be my nefesh habahamis is a bit strong. How serious is it? Is the idea that I can be going against Hashem's will? And this itself breaks the nefesh habahamis, so he won't come to any averis, even b'shoigeg. And through this, of course, we are zoicha to the Nesius of Melech HaMashiach, who will reveal the kingdom of Hashem in the whole world.